So I want to talk about speech anxiety management because I know that's on a lot of people's minds. And I really want to unpack like why we actually get nervous. It's a difficult thing to pinpoint, but like why do we get nervous when we speak? Now, I know y'all have much more medical experience and knowledge than I do. So feel free to correct me if I'm wrong. I will be stood corrected, right? But in doing a little bit of digging on this myself, the prefrontal cortex contains a lot of our memories. Am I on track with that? It's like when we try to activate our memories, we're retrieving them from the prefrontal cortex. But there are hormones that we experience, like cortisol, that when we experience stress, our cortisol levels skyrocket. And it's harder for us to retrieve those memories from our prefrontal cortex. And what happens is that when we lose something that we're trying to grab onto, or when we don't quite catch it, our brain is aware of that. And now we're in panic mode because it's like, oh, I missed something. Oh, I missed something else. Oh, I'm stuck. I don't even know what to do. And then we get into this cycle that's hard to stop. And so this is what actually happens in the brain. That's the scientific answer. And this is also very connected with the idea of fight or flight. When you're giving a speech, especially giving a speech alone, there's this idea that like you are the expert and you have the information that people are looking for. And oftentimes it can seem like we're doing something really risky on our own, right? So this idea of doing a really difficult thing in what we perceive to be a lonely and potentially dangerous environment, right? When we talk about speech as being in some classes 40% of our grade, 50% of our grade, that's like a perceived level of danger that we know going into these type of engagements. And fight or flight is not helpful in public speaking situations. Like if I were to like flee and leave right now, that would help nobody. We would just be left on a cliffhanger, right? And then if you try to fight through it, if you try to like stumble through a speech and you're on a particular topic and you just can't get it, but you keep trying, that's not really helpful either. We need to be able to move on from different things that happen as we speak and not necessarily struggle through it. I want to dig a little deeper, but why is public speaking lonely and dangerous? Specifically, why do we over-criticize ourselves? And I argue, again, in looking at the research, I have my bachelor's degree in communication as well, and looking at the cultural factors that influence how we communicate with each other, it is our nature as humans to seek out belonging and community, right? We don't want to feel isolated most of the times. We don't want to feel like we are different from everybody else. And so when we over-criticize ourselves, often that is a defense mechanism against failure. Often it could be used as a tool to cope with failure, like letting the people know around you, oh, I just failed right now. I'm looking for your validation. I just want to let you know I'm super frustrated with myself. I know I should have did better. Like these things that we tell ourselves are usually connected to how others perceive us, or at least the idea that others are perceiving us negatively. And to really draw this out for people, there's a complicated relationship between belonging and individualism. Again, as I said in my keynote, we live in a society where individual achievements are praised. We live in a society where if you give a clean, smooth speech with no interruptions, you get an A for that in most cases, right? And so there's this interesting relationship between wanting community, which is fundamental to our nature as humans, and then also a little bit of individualism into this. And that leads to us intensely critiquing ourselves even before we give the speech, which I personally have done myself. I've spent way too much time looking at speeches that are already great, right? Trying to make them like that 1% better, right? So we can be aware of that. And then the threat of failure leads to the threat of exclusion. Again, if I fail, I'm losing out on opportunities. I'm losing out on internships. I'm losing out on that grade that I want. I'm losing out on the favor of the people around me. People are going to talk about me after I leave here. Like all of these things play into our nervousness. Is this resonating with people? Are people kind of understanding where this comes from? And so I want to get into some causes, and then I want us to be able to talk to each other. Again, I really like the conversation that we've had so far. When we look at the causes of speech anxiety, there are some cultural factors that play into that. There's this expectation that we have to talk and think quickly in order to be perceived as intelligent. There's this idea that Speaking is natural. People say all the time, well, Jordan, like, you're a natural at this. Like, no, I haven't been speaking publicly in front of hundreds of people out the womb. Like, I've developed skills around it. I've exposed myself to a bunch of different situations. People don't know. I was a competitive hip hop dancer in middle school. So I was always used to being in front of crowds, and even then I was a little bit shy to speak, right? So speaking is a skill that could be developed. It's not something that, oh, you have it or you don't, right? So really understanding that. The idea that there's a one-way transfer of knowledge. You could tell this by how a lot of our classes and how our universities are set up, where you'll walk into a lecture hall and all the seats are facing the front because the professor is expected to be at the front. And so when we walk into rooms, even this one that we're in right now, I would love for y'all to be able to talk to each other in small groups, but because of our expectations around what a workshop is supposed to be, the people haven't designed the room that way. And y'all can see my frustration with that, right? So there's this idea of a one-way transfer of knowledge, and then the fear of humiliation. Again, if I mess up here and I leave, people are going to talk about me for the next couple of hours. But wait, there's more. There's the idea of scarcity. If I bomb this interview, what's going to happen to my professional career? If I don't do well in this presentation, what's going to happen as a result of that? Again, am I going to miss out on professional opportunities because of this? I want this internship so bad, and I'm so nervous because I want this one internship so bad, and I can't see myself outside of this opportunity. So really trying to dismantle that thinking in multiplicity, thinking in there are an abundance of experiences and this is just one. The job needs me more than I need the job. And it really takes some confidence building in order to have that within this group. There's social power dynamics. A lot of these things are really difficult for folks for whom English is a second language, and I'm sensitive to that. Those who are historically marginalized in our society, I'm cognizant of that. Those for whom they have some neurodivergency, and they might need a little bit of extra time to grab that thought. But again, the idea is that we have to speak quickly and think quickly. And then real life circumstances, like if I don't get this job, I don't know what's going to happen financially. Like that's a real thing too. And so I'm just naming potential sources. A university president that I heard speak recently said, we can't solve a problem unless we could talk about it. So if we're not aware of this, if we haven't labeled these, okay, these are the things that are making me nervous, then how can we overcome them? How can we reorient ourselves around them?